Stunned silence.
I know, I'm just wondering if we've lost Ross. Ross? Are you there? Let me check my Slack.
Ross, where have you gone? We really want you to come back. Ross, Owen is checking for you on Slack.
He's going to have a ball editing this.
Hello and welcome to the Good Practice Podcast, a weekly show about work, performance and learning. I'm Ross Dickie, and this week we're looking at how L&D can contribute to the customer experience, also known as CX. I'm joined by podcast regular Owen Ferguson. Hello, Owen.
Hello, Ross.
As well as special guest Mike Collins from River Island. Hello, Mike.
Hello, Ross.
So, Mike, I'll start with you. What exactly is CX, and how does it differ from regular old customer service?
That is a very, very good question, and probably a really good place to start. So I think customer service is part of customer experience. And I guess my interest and my fascination with customer experience has grown, certainly over the last 12 months, 18 months. And I think there is a growing trend for everything to have experience tagged on the end of it. So whether that's a learning experience, whether it's a candidate experience, whether it's a employee experience, an experience, it seems to be everywhere. And I think where I've enjoyed sort of digging deeper is around this transformation of customer service. So we all provide customer service, no matter whether you're in retail, manufacturing, whether you work, in a bank, any sort of business provides customer service. But I think where my thinking has been up to now is that customer service is quite transactional. It's face to face. It's somebody serving you with a smile, and giving good customer service. But in actual fact, customer service starts when you first interact with a brand, when you interact with a website, any sort of product, any service. So customer service is part of an overarching experience that I think all organizations and, whether that's an internal team in an organization or an organization selling a good or product, has an opportunity to create an experience. Now, whether that is face to face, whether it is online, whether it is through a video, whether it's through a website, a portal, whether it's through a smile, a handshake or something, it's about creating a relationship, an emotional connection. It's something that, feels good and makes people want to come back and keep interacting with that product or service. And I think that's where the work at River Island that I've been involved in over the last 12 to 18 months, really resonates with me, because we're essentially an omni-channel business. We've got store, so bricks and mortar is a massive part of River Island. We've got our web portal, and, the majority of people now want to interact with businesses through digital means, through websites. And we've also got our app as well. So, we've broken down our customer journey into these different elements and really focused on what are the experiences that we want to create at every step that allows people to interact with us as a brand and ultimately buy our products. And if you use that as a starting point and then you start looking at things like, where L&D fit into this, then you can absolutely translate those principles, as it were, into breaking down what your learning journeys are or where your customers actually interact with you. So I think as a starting point, I hope that has set us off on the right track.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it strikes me that obviously poses quite a few challenges for organizations, because, as you say, customers now expect to be able to interact with a brand in a number of different ways. They expect to be able to speak to somebody face to face, maybe over the phone, online, on their phones, on an app. And as customers, I think our expectations in the last few years or in the last decade or so have also changed drastically. I think the companies like Amazon, for instance, have changed our expectations of the retail experience. And so retailers are not just competing with, the shop down the street. They're competing with these sort of online companies, and even companies that don't necessarily work in the same sector as them. They're competing with other experiences that different organizations are able to offer. I was thinking we use Uber quite a lot in Chicago, and I noticed the other day that we tend to grumble when it sort of takes more than 5 minutes to arrive, and it wasn't that long ago that you would call a taxi, and if it was there in 5 minutes, you'd think this is amazing. And now it's we sort of expect everything to be sort of available instantly, and to receive sort of high quality service, and so that poses a lot of challenges for organizations, but including L&D within that.
So I think when you say the words customer service, people tend to think about that person-to-person interaction, so calling up a contact center or dealing with someone face-to-face, and often it's in a situation where you've maybe got a complaint to make. But for me, the move to thinking about the customer experience is that it's a much more holistic view about how the organization interacts with its customer base. So Ross, you mentioned Amazon, and there's the basics there of finding the thing that you want and paying for it, but there's far more to the whole experience of that. It's the one-click ordering, it's how quickly it arrives at your house, it's the notifications or text messages that tells you what the status is of your delivery, how the delivery person interacts with you or where they leave the package if you're not in, the packaging that the items arrives in, how easy is it to open and recycle, the condition of the item when it arrives. So all of those touch points, every time that you are interacting in some way, shape or form through whatever medium, affects your experience. And I'm not for 1 second suggesting that Amazon get all of that right, because you mentioned, wanting to be able to speak to someone in person. It's actually really difficult to get hold of Amazon customer service person on the phone, or I find it is. But that relentless focus on removing friction and pain points and anticipating your needs is something that you see companies work on very hard from a sort of consumer perspective. And I guess one of the questions is, to what extent can we take that kind of approach internally?
It's a very good question.
Yeah, do you want to pick up on that, Mike?
Yeah, listen, I totally agree there. And I think one of the things that, again, and I'm going to talk from a retail specific point of view here, in that, people will interact and buy clothes through the web and the app. However, people still like that face-to-face interaction. They like coming into store, trying clothes on. So by breaking that holistic customer journey down, what you're able to do is to really be specific in what area you want to improve a particular interaction or experience in, because people might have a great digital experience, but they come into store and somebody's having a really bad day. They don't smile. They don't, make the customer feel welcome. And straight away, what that customer will do is go, well, actually, I'm just going to go to one of our competitors who I'm not going to name. They don't need any more advertising than they already get. But essentially, at any point during that customer journey, you can turn customers off or you can turn customers on. And I think expectation, Ross, is what you were talking about there. And absolutely right. The Amazon effect has impacted everything, from the Toys R Us and the Maplins of this world, that has really impacted through the channels in which customers are buying products, but also this expectation that now if you're a Prime user and you're paying, whatever, £8 a month, and you can order something at 8:30 on that day, and you will get it before 1 o'clock the following day, and you're like, wow, that's absolutely incredible. But that then is the expectation for all other retailers and sellers, and if you have to pay for delivery now, you're kind of almost grumbling, because that Prime cost that you pay isn't something that you see every day. It's just one off and then it's done. And then you get this high level of delivery service. So there is expectations there. Absolutely. The other thing is around perception. Now, because we might perceive that our experiences and our customer service and what we're providing is really good, but ultimately your customers are in charge here. Your customers will ultimately decide whether or not you are providing great experiences. It absolutely boils down to how your customers perceive them. So whilst you might think you're doing a good job, your customers might tell you something different. And this is where I think, linking back into your question, Owen, which is around customer feedback. It's around understanding your customer base, your target audience, truly understanding what your customer needs are. And I think that is a fundamental basis for where customer experience comes from. Because if you're not interacting with your customers, if you're not understanding their buying habits, if you're not understanding what they need, what they want, what history might tell you, and this again where Amazon does something really well with their, you bought this, therefore we're going to recommend this because other people that have bought what you've bought have also bought this. So expectations, perceptions are all rolled into the mix. And I think, when you look at it from an L&D perspective, why wouldn't we want to get as close to our customers as possible and get that constant feedback? Not talking about evaluation, not going down the lines of Kirkpatrick or Brinkoff or anything like that. Think about your holistic customer journey of people through attraction, through recruitment, through onboarding, through induction, through whatever development, learning, training, whatever, through to them leaving the organization. And that's where I think learning and development and human resources, absolutely have a place to play. And whether or not it is customer experience, people experience, learning experience, how are we creating the best working experiences, the best workplaces that people can come in and do the best work and, dare I say, enjoy it. And I think we've absolutely got a part to play. So I'm going to step down now and let somebody else talk.
It is interesting though, isn't it? Because sometimes I think, so, who owns the remit for that customer experience piece? Because it can be quite diffuse. So if you think about, I think the customer experience is impacted most by the things that people are doing most frequently. So it's the things that, and so sometimes that is stuff like let's say if it's submitting expenses, for example, who owns the experience of that? Whose person? Because, a lot of the time it will be the finance function that will buy a thing, chuck it out there and say, well, you've got to submit your expenses. Here's the thing. But if you're doing that and it's a miserable experience, I wonder whether that has an outweighed impact on how you feel about something as opposed to something that might strictly fall within the remit of HR or learning and development.
I think that point around ownership is super interesting. And I was looking, when I was reading around this topic in preparation for the podcast, I came across an example on McKinsey's website where they were talking about, if you have a call center, and imagine the call center is the best call center you've ever come across. Every interaction they have with clients are fantastic. But if the client needs to call the call center 10 times to get what they're looking for, then that's still not, even if they have a great experience of the call center, it's still not a good customer experience because it's sort of preventing them from getting what they want. They shouldn't need to call the call center at all in an ideal world. I think Apple are a really good example of this. I recently had to call Apple because the screen on my MacBook died, and compared to other call center experiences, it was really great. It didn't really feel like it was in a call center. It seemed like the person I was speaking to was in a room on their own. There was no sort of buzz in the background of other conversations going on. They were very personable, made me feel like I was they were taking my case seriously as an individual. But ultimately, I still had to go down to the Apple store to make an appointment to get the thing fixed. So, I think, organizations tend to operate within silos. This is finance's responsibility, this is HR's responsibility. But I think for a customer experience to be effective, or for an organization to deliver a great customer experience, it needs to be something that is sort of approached holistically, like you were saying. Yeah,
I agree. I think that's one of the areas where, I've been really, really impressed with, which is cross-functional working. So it's so easy for organizations to work in that silo mentality. Marketing do their thing, customer service do their thing, operations do their thing, retail just have to do what they do to, keep, customers in and happy. But ultimately, I think, it is, it's thinking about your customer front and center. It's not thinking about, have we got the right technology in? Have we got the right processes? And then what the customer experience is. If you start with what you want your customer experience to be, then you work out the processes that sit around your customer, and then you work out the right technology that will enable you to provide the best experience. I think that is certainly a flip that I've seen, rather than leading with, well, that tech gives that experience, so that's what we want. And I think the other thing too, and this I'm sure Owen will chip in here with some thoughts, is around measurement. So it's great that you can do all these customer experience initiatives, and you can really focus on different areas of the customer journey. But how are you measuring that? So 4 areas that we've been measuring external customer feedback is around Net Promoter Score, customer effort score, which ties in, Ross, with what you were saying there around actually how much does a customer have to work at actually buying and getting stuff from you as an organization. First contact resolution, so how many times is somebody having to call up to get a resolution fixed, and then how many contacts per 1,000 orders. So those 4 measurements give quite a breadth of insight for us. So again, when you're looking at it from cross-functional purposes, one department might think that their priority is over here, but in actual fact, your feedback is telling you the priority needs to shift over here. And in order to do that, you're going to have to work with another department to enable that to happen. So I think having that level of insight and feedback is absolutely paramount to you being able to make the right decisions and prioritize who needs to do what and when you need to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's so I ordered something online recently, and one of the things that I was most impressed by is I tend to check and I tend to track the order. So it's an action that I carry out on a regular basis with this online provider. So, go in and check it and see, right, where is it? And it'll, I'll kind of watch it go through the various different stages of it's been sent to the dispatch, sent to the depot, it's been dispatched, it's out, it's due for delivery between such and such time.
Is it a bit like Track Santa on Christmas Eve, where you can see Santa going across the globe?
Yeah, exactly. It's when is he arriving? Waiting there for him with a shotgun.
We'll maybe cut that
bit harsh.
But what I noticed that they have started to do is they started to push that to me. So I don't know whether that is something that I would imagine that they are collecting all this information and saying, do you know something that people are doing an awful lot is they're coming in and they're checking the status of their package. So if they're doing that, why not anticipate their needs and start pushing it out to them so that they don't have to make the effort of going, and it's almost like it's a trivial effort, but they've just removed a little bit of effort from my process, my experience of buying from them. And that kind of mindset, it is both the measurement, but it's also, it's the measurement in service of further improvement, as well as checking to make sure that what the other changes that you've made have made a difference.
If we're to think specifically about L&D and how they fit into that puzzle, Mike, do you want to give us a bit of an overview of what you've been doing at River Island?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, so a good example of creating an experience was around our retail manager induction. So, the challenge was that people were turning up into store on the first day and not really having had an experience of what River Island's like. So one of the initiatives that we did was recorded some 360 video and created some 360 headsets, just like Google Cardboard. And, when a new retail manager's starting, a week before they're due to start, they get this nice welcome pack that's branded River Island, and within it they've got this headset that they get to put on. They've got a link that takes them to a mobile first welcome. It's got videos, it's got welcomes, but the 360 videos are from the training store managers talking about the areas that they're working and setting the scene for what they're going to be doing within the first week. And feedback that we've had has been overwhelmingly positive of new people getting a connection with the store and the brand before they've even set foot in the store. And that's been really powerful, because that sort of sets us up for, well, where else can we do this? Whether it's a 360 tour of River Island HQ, whether it is helping people understand what it's like to experience the canteen, building up a narrative and a story of life at River Island. And I think, from a learning and development perspective, and, I more and more that I work in and around this, I don't think that it is necessarily all about learning. It's, you create learning opportunities through people's experiences, whether they are positive, negative, or indifferent. So the more positive experiences that you can create, people will tie some sort of knowledge acquisition or emotional connection or brand loyalty through that. And that's where we're really focusing now within our inductions, our onboarding, and then working out what helps people develop and get better at their jobs. And whilst workshops have been one of our primary channels to do that, we're absolutely exploring different ways in which we can, get people together. So actually they're sharing their own knowledge as well as L&D taking the center stage. So things around, technical focus areas. So, we're actually going to people's departments rather than them coming to the classroom, and the training room, and essentially getting experts within the business to create the resources with our support. And then we're using an agile approach, not in the sense of flexibility, but, like software development, we're working, in sprints. We're engaging with our subject matter experts, and we're doing daily stand-ups. We've got a backlog of priorities. And because we can do that, we can create stuff really quickly, get it into the hands of our customers and get that real-time feedback. And I know we mentioned it earlier there about that iterative process, that mindset of continuous improvement. And I think the days of us ever going away and working on a, leadership development program for 6 months and then launching it and it just falls flat, we just don't work like that anymore. And I think that aligns itself to this concept of customer experience or learning experience. So you build it with your customers as you go, iterating all the time, designing with them at the front of the design methodology and the thinking, and they build it with us. So L&D certainly don't sit in isolation. They're massively part of the business and helping shape content, support, resources, as we go.
So how did you initially identify the store manager, joining experience as something that needed to be improved?
Again, through feedback. So the way retail is split is there are heads of retail, there's area managers and store managers. I don't think any retailer can say that, staff turnover is low. It doesn't happen. Of course it does. So, we've got to try and make sure that the problems that the business face and the challenges that the business face are our problems as well. So we had a working group. We got people from retail risk. We had people from retail ops. We had people from retail all get together and say, right, how can we create a better experience for people so they're not turning up on day one essentially not clueless, because there was stuff that was happening before, but certainly armed with the things that and again managing their expectations and perception of working at River Island. How can we improve that massively? So we talked about lots of different options, and we felt that experience of getting something through the door, something educational, something building awareness, creating that connection with somebody, exciting them, engaging them about working for this great brand that's been on the high street for 30 years and in business for 70 years. There's a great history and tradition there and heritage in River Island, and that wasn't coming across. So if you get that right from day one, then that certainly adds to somebody's ability to get up to speed quickly and have an affinity with the brand and feel like they're part of something, as opposed to just joining and, not really feeling part of the team straight away.
So it really is taking some of those core ideas that drive customer experience design and focusing them internally.
Absolutely. I believe so. Yeah, I hope so.
Right. Do you find, because you work in the people experience team, so it's not about L&D or HR, but it's about people experience. Do you find the fact that you work for a function that has been set up in that way helps with that, or could an L&D team essentially take that kind of approach anyway?
So this rebranding of people experience, we all know that rebrands have happened, whether it's Marathon to Snickers, Sif to Jif, whatever the rebrand is. Sometimes it just tastes the same and it's just the wrapper that's changed. But I think the fundamental shift here is that we brought together teams that do impact and have a massive role to play in that people experience. So your attraction, your recruitment, your learning and development, all now sit together. So it's not a case of, well, they look after that and we look after this, and therefore you're accountable for that. It's joint accountability. And I think that message now is getting out to the business to say that actually, whereas before you might not have expected us to get involved, we're absolutely involved because we're championing the people that work for River Island. We want their experiences to be exactly the same. So I think that rebrand, whilst it's not just a name change, it fundamentally shifts how we influence and impact every step of somebody who works for River Island, whether it's on their first day or whether it's through their, they've handed the notice in and they're leaving, and they join an alumni group. So this is really important for us. And I think, to your point, Owen, that any team can do this, but I think it does depend on where HR and learning and development are potentially seen and what their role is in the business. And it does sometimes take some forward thinking people to be able to have those conversations and to shift the positioning and where those teams are actually seen and the value that they can create. But I do believe more and more organizations are seeing it that way and enabling HR and learning development to become, these greater, powers, influencers, encouragers, role models within the business to create better workplaces, which essentially is what we're, talking about.
Yeah. So, Mike, a lot of the hype around customer experience seems to be related to the technology. So, artificial intelligence, chatbots. Does L&D or the people experience team now need to reskill itself if it's going to work in this new way that you're outlining?
Yes, to a degree. And I think so it's absolutely about education and awareness. So if you go to Learning Technologies, if you go to World of Learning, if you go to any of the HR tech conferences, you are probably amazed and astounded and shocked at just how much choice there is now in terms of software as a service platforms, learning experience platforms, learning record stores, chatbots. There's a lot said out there around artificial intelligence or machine learning or just chatbots that have a clever algorithm that sits beneath it. And I think you need a skill set within any team that can cut through some of that sales hype. And I'm choosing my words very carefully there because I think everyone understands that, salespeople are in it for sales. They've got to position their platform or their technology. And, there's a certain amount of creative license. You can't go to any of these conferences now without hearing the words, micro learning, personalization, recommendation engines. We want your learning to be like Netflix, which is fine. It's consumerism driving, the learning industry. But I think the learning industry and suppliers and technology providers, absolutely have responsibility here to ensure that their customers are educated and aware of what they're actually buying. And there's some platforms out there that sell the tech, and you buy the tech, but fundamentally it's the behaviors that drive the tech. So learning and development still have, to understand what it means to role model what those technologies can achieve and can do. And ultimately, if you're talking about social learning, social interaction, communities, people sit at the heart of that rather than the tech. So I think the reskilling is understanding the value that the tech can provide and not just thinking that the tech is going to come in with a solution and solve all your problems. So I think one skill is to be able to cut through the crap and understand what it is that you're actually talking about and what it's going to create and how that can impact and show value. And then the other bit is actually practicing what you preach. We've been talking about, being more social in organizations, user generated content, peer-to-peer learning, the whole raft of different ways in which employees are now part of, the solution, and learning and development are, community organizers and encouragers and role models, and I think that is still a skill set that is absent in a lot of teams, in a lot of organizations. So absolutely, I think, we do need to continually reskill ourselves to ensure that we are maximizing the opportunities that tech provides, but also developing those core skills and behaviors that support digital and everything that sits around it. I mean, what do you think? I mean, you work for a supplier, so I'm going to put you on the spot now. GoodPractice, you are, I believe, now going into, or you just launched a learning management system. You are repositioning yourself as a digital organization. So what's that journey been like for you? What are you hearing?
Well, I think, so the consumerization piece, I think, is interesting because I think in some ways, it's what people are asking for is just better. It's almost like our experience in our consumer lives is better. It's easier. I think it would be a mistake for providers to take too many cues from that because the context is totally different. So it's about, how do we create a delightful experience, but for the purposes and the intentions that people have when they're at work, rather than let's just copy a whole bunch of things that Netflix have done, because ultimately Netflix are solving a completely different problem. So there's an element of that, but it really comes down to what I think the consumer side has gotten right much more quickly is putting the customer putting the end user at the heart of what they're doing and really trying to understand their needs and their concerns and what they care about, and then addressing those, and often in an incredibly systematic way. So that tends to be how we try and work.
So we'll move on now to our regular feature, What I Learned This Week, where we each discuss something we learned in the last 7 days. Owen, would you like to get us started?
Sure. So someone, and I have to apologise because I couldn't find who it was, but they shared a video from the Jimmy Kimmel Show. So Jimmy Kimmel, for those who don't know, is a late night talk show host in the US. And the video was actually from 2017, but I've only just recently seen it. And basically there's it's a short section where the team that produced the show have stopped people who are passing the theatre where it gets recorded. And they tell people that they're talking to people about a recent cybersecurity breach, and they're asking people how secure their internet passwords are. And then they simply ask, what do you use for an internet password? And then people simply tell them. They tell them on camera what they use for their passwords online. And so they'll say things like, oh, well, I use my last name and a few digits. And the interviewer says, oh, what's your last name? And they say, oh, it's Wilson. And what kind of digits do you use? And then the person being interviewed will tell them their birth date, and then they'll tell them how old they are. It's absolutely incredible. So I had two thoughts watching that. One was that there is a criminal scam waiting to happen here by simply asking people what their password is. But the other is that I think people are even more lax with their own personal security than I had realised. It's really quite terrifying. So I'm sure we will post a link to that in the show notes.
Yeah, great. Yeah, it's kind of terrifying. Mike, what did you learn this week?
Well, I'm going to be a bit cheeky if I may and use two, because Owen's just reminded me after talking about the Late Show. So I've just turned 40, and last week we went to New York City, which was a brand new experience for me. So the first thing I learned was that the way in which they get the live audience in for the live shows. So if any of you out there have watched late night shows with either Kimmel or Seth Meyers, we went to view Seth Meyers, and it's the military operation that sits behind the show to get the live audience in. From queuing up and getting tickets to being there at the right time, to queuing up, to being security searched and going through x-ray machines, to having tickets, to sitting in the green room, to seeing the live warm-up act, to cheering until your voice is absolutely hoarse, to walking in the studio and seeing 1,000 lights attached to the ceiling, the live band with all their instruments, and then Seth comes out and his auto cue is literally pieces of paper held above the camera by some dude who's literally moving the paper off after he finishes his after each bit. And I just thought that, after everything that we've just done that's automated and down to a fine precision, it was just fantastic. I genuinely enjoyed the whole experience. And my second one is what I've learned is that the best way to see New York City is on a bike. And it threads really nicely with this whole customer experience, because City Bikes in New York have an app. You pay $10 a day, and you can go to any of the hundreds of bike stations across New York City. And for $10 a day, you get to take a bike out. And if you get to the next station within 30 minutes, you don't pay any extra. And I think on one day we did about 24 miles on the bikes. We rode over Brooklyn Bridge, and it was absolutely spectacular. I would encourage anybody who goes to New York City to do it on a bike. No, not actually get there on a bike, because that would be very strange. But when you are there, I would highly recommend that you check out City Bikes and just view New York City from the view of a bike. It's tremendous.
Great. Well, mine is also about customer experience. When I was flying over to Chicago, I flew down initially from Edinburgh to London, and my flight was delayed by an hour and a half due to the weather. And this resulted in me missing my connection to Chicago. I then spent 4 hours in a line waiting to get rebooked, only to be told that it was a different carrier. I booked the flight with one airline, but the sort of transatlantic section of the journey was operated by a different carrier. So they were responsible for getting me a hotel for the night. So this was after 4 hours of waiting in line and being told that I was in the correct line, that I then needed to go and stand in a completely different terminal. I think airports are are a pretty good example of the customer experience done badly. But, you know, it struck me that, you know, I like to think of myself as fairly level-headed and calm. It takes quite a lot to get my my sort of ire up, basically. But I absolutely lost after 4 hours of standing in this line for what turned out to be nothing, because I'd already been rebooked automatically onto a flight. I was pretty livid. And then I woke up last week, I think a week ago today, to an email from the airline saying that I was to be compensated, and they were going to also, you know, refund me for my hotel. And so I'm now left in a position where I don't really know how I feel about the brand. On the one hand, I had a terrible experience. On the other hand, I essentially got to Chicago for free. So would I rebook with them again? Probably yes. So I guess what I've learned about myself is I will tolerate a fairly terrible customer experience as long as it's for free.
Oh dear. So the experience was worth every penny that you paid.
Exactly. And that's all for this week. If you'd like to share your thoughts on the show, you can find us all on Twitter. Owen is
at Owen Ferguson.
Mike is
at community_Mike.
And I am at Ross_Dickie. You can also tweet at GoodPractice or at GoodPracticeAUS. To find out more about our performance support toolkit and bespoke e-learning, visit goodpractice.com. Finally, thank you to Ewan Naismith, who took up the call to leave us a review on iTunes. Quote, "Probably the best L&D podcast presented by people called Ross who live in Inverness and Chicago ever." If you agree with Ewan, I invite you to follow his example and leave us a review of your own. It helps you people discover the show, and we'd really appreciate it. Next week, Ross G and Owen are back for a live show where they'll be tackling the question, what does 70-20-10 actually look like in practice? Thanks for listening. Bye for now.